All right. Hello, everybody. And this is Welcome to the Reality Czars podcast. We're your hosts, Nate and Tony. And we have awesome guest on today. His name is Matt. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I am Matt Erickson's my name. I am the host of I'm the co-host of the Wealth, Power, and Influence podcast with Jason Stapleton. And I've been doing that for about 3 years. And then I am the host, I guess also co-host of another podcast we just started several months ago called King Pilled. And I've gone on a journey over the last several years, especially over the last couple, from originally kind of like I grew up a really conservative Christian and a Protestant. I was Seventh-day Adventist growing up, and kind of drifted away from the church throughout my 20s. Went to college, and that's kind of what started it, as happens with a lot of people. And I kind of just drifted away from the church and got into sports and politics and that kind of thing. And then through the course of digging into politics and trying, it's like, if you want to understand what's happening right now, you need to go figure out what happened just before now. And so I would go back a little bit in history and try to understand what's happening. And then I realized, okay, well, to understand that, I need to go back a little further. And so I was kind of doing that. And okay, well, I need to go back a little further. I kept doing this process until eventually I got, it's like I got zoomed out really, really far. And I started recognizing these cycles that always happen throughout human culture. And it kind of occurred to me, I kind of came to the realization that religion and politics are effectively the same thing, that it's like the same software running on the operating system of our consciousness, I guess you might say. And that was a really big kind of a red pill for me. And so at the point where that occurred, there's probably about a year and a half ago. It's happened. There wasn't a major light bulb moment. It just kind of happened over the course of time. But I considered myself at the time a pretty like rabid Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist. And even now, I don't know, like subconsciously, I still see myself that way. I feel as if I've gone even deeper into it, but I've started finding myself just not seeing the world the same way as most ANCAPs, and kind of we're a little bit at loggerheads in some ways. So I guess if you're anywhere around Libertarian Twitter or anything like that, or you listen to the Libertarian podcast circuit, you probably came across me in the last 4 to 6 weeks. I had an appearance on Pete Quinones' show, Free Man Beyond the Wall, and that got a pretty big hullabaloo. And immediately after that, I was invited to go on the Liberty Lockdown podcast by Clint Russell, and I did that podcast with Vin Armani, or Cyprian as he's known now, and that ended up being quite a spicy show, and it got a lot of people talking, and I got inundated with interview requests. So, and that's what got me to here.
Yeah. So I almost think that you're on the post-anarchist journey, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And dude, I listened to your episode with Pete, and you kind of just exploded my fucking brain. Frankly, like I couldn't shut up about you for like a couple days. Like I was driving my wife fucking nuts.
What was it? What was it that got you?
I think the biggest thing is like with the whole voting thing, because dude, I've been an agorist. I've been like a fucking like anti-political libertarian for like the last couple of years. I was hard, like voting is violence, a hardcore voluntarist. And just like listening to you and listening to Pete, because I've been listening to Pete too and on his journey, but like, do you actually want fucking liberty, or are you just busy living in Ancapistan in your head? And what the fuck are we doing, man? Because like me and Tony had been actually talking, like we had been on our own little journey thinking about that. Because like I was actually watching, Tony, you're gonna have to help me out with this because I always forget his name. Who is the fucking crazy cult leader? You know who I'm talking about? That from Oregon.
The Rajneesh.
Yeah, the Rajneesh. Yeah. Dude,
Yeah.
I was watching that documentary and I was like, could we fucking do that? What's stopping us from doing that? Like, I want to take over a little fucking tiny town. You're the fucking mayor. I'll be the sheriff. You're the who? You know what I mean? Like, can we? And I was like, well, this contradicts my principles. And you know what I mean? And I'm like, and I'm fighting this in my head. and I'm like, I won't even fucking vote for a tax to be lowered. You know what I mean? Because I'm such a fucking autistic asshole. And then your fucking show just blew my fucking brains out.
Well, that's good.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that's I guess my impression of agorism had always I guess I'd had a mistaken understanding of it, because my understanding of agorism had always been that it was it was basically a complete detachment from the state, and the ideology of basically living in all the negative space from the state and never having anything to do with it. But apparently, I've had a few people tell me now that the ideas that I'm talking about, the ideas of look out for your own self, take care of your own life, provide for yourself and your family, ensure your own stability and security.
100%.
Right. But the part I didn't realize is apparently part of agorism is there isn't necessarily a principled opposition to engaging with the state. It's that you're going to engage with the state on your terms. And so if you have to buy off a politician or pay off a lobbyist or whatever to maintain your lifestyle, then you do that on a pragmatic basis. I didn't realize that was part of agorism. And it was Vin Armani who reached out to me after one of the episodes I did recently, and he said what you're describing is what Konkin described in agorism. He said you don't even have to bother reading the book, because he said you already get it, and he said your presentation of it is even more charismatic than his, so you don't even have to bother reading him, but you get it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, so I guess I'm an agorist.
yeah,
right.
Goddamn, Konkin was such a bad motherfucker, dude.
What's interesting is apparently the reason he wrote the book was as a response to Rothbard getting sucked into the LP, and we're seeing there's a parallel here now where that exact same thing is happening. That one of the most prominent radical Rothbardian ANCAPs right now is now involving himself with the LP. And so you're starting to see a revival of agorist sentiment. So it's kind of like, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
Yeah, it is interesting. There is a split breaking right now between, I would say, between the radicals. So Dave has definitely been able to, Dave Smith, everybody should know who the fuck we're talking about. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you know who he is. But he has really recruited a lot of the radicals, the people that were, actual anarchists, and then I think, like you said, there's been a fucking split. There's people that are just like, fuck the LP, because I've been saying fuck the LP forever. I think technically I'm a member of the LP, and I think I tried to fucking vote for Gary Johnson back in 2016, but that was the one shame I've ever had. But yeah, no, there's actually, I think that there's going to be a split here, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because, frankly, I can see some of the good that the Mises Caucus does. On the local level, I can see them decriminalizing fucking mushrooms in little places here and there, and where I can see little glimpses of fucking liberty being, and I think that's where you can, on the very small scale, in a small area, and for that I say, fuck yeah, go for it. Are we wasting our time with a presidential run? Probably.
Because what I would say is that I agree with you on the local level. I agree with you that that's where stuff can be accomplished. But what makes that very difficult is a really big, loud national campaign that gets everybody looking at the LP. Like those two things work against each other. If your goal is we're going to work behind the scenes at the local level, what makes the local level effective is the fact that it's not in the eye of Sauron. But if you're going to do this big, loud, run at the regime, shaking our balls at it campaign, you're just going to get the eye of Sauron directed at you. And so that's going to compromise what you can do. Or I don't know if I can't say that it will compromise it. I think it will compromise it. What it will do is it will direct more attention to the local level, which will change the way that you have to devote resources and or I guess allocate resources, and it'll change your strategy at the local level. And I think it's in a way that makes it more inefficient. So my opposition to the whole take over the LP thing isn't it's not a principled opposition. It's not like I have a principled moral issue with participating in a political party. It's that I think it's a strategic error, and I think it's a massive strategic error. I think it's a colossal blunder, and I think that making that blunder demonstrates in the people who participate in it a complete misunderstanding of the nature of the state, where the state comes from, how the state operates, and the mechanisms whereby it sustains itself. Because
I think a lot of people don't have that understanding.
Right.
I think a lot of people are super lost on that, and I think a lot of people are just desperate. And Dave is selling a good fucking like a nice looking sports car, and it's good.
And that's where you got like the kind of the dramatic part of the Liberty Lockdown interview was because of that dynamic right there. That I mean, if you so the book, if you listen to my Pete Quinones interview, you heard me mention the book The Machiavellians by James Burham.
I've got it written down. I'm going to buy it.
Good.
I was going to try to read it before we had our conversation, but
it'll take you a while to get through, to be perfectly frank. And I'll say this to you or to anybody listening who's thinking about reading it. The first little bit of the book will be rough going. It's a bit of a slog at first. The first couple, I think it's like five sections maybe. And like the first 2 sections are a little rough getting through. Once you've read the whole book, when you go back and you read through those sections, you connect with them a lot more. But it would like the book would have been better if it was structured in a different order, perhaps. So the first little bit of the book will be a little dry, a little hard to get through, but then it'll really take off. And what you understand once you read that book, the way that Burnham lays out the functioning of a political system, Gaetano Mosca's concept of the political formula, which is that every regime, no matter the structure or the nature of the regime, it has a mythology. It has a story that it tells everyone, that it tells itself for why it exists. But that story is always just that. It's a story. Then there's the actual justification, and this happens at a fractal level. It happens on the overall reason for the regime to exist. But even on the local policy level, an easy example is you'll see corporations will advocate for raising the minimum wage. And so the story that they have for that is poor people work minimum wage jobs. They're struggling in the economy, so we need poor people to have more money, so we need to raise the minimum wage so they get more money. But any ANCAP understands the actual reason that the corporation is supporting the raise in the minimum wage is because it'll put their competition out of business. It'll give them a competitive advantage. So that's the political formula. You have the formal justification for the policy that is what everyone talks about. Then you have the informal actual reason for the policy. So that's just one example of the type of it's the book approaches political science as a science. You're looking at this as like impersonally. You're not having a conversation about what should or shouldn't happen. You're having a conversation about what does happen. And then you're understanding why.
That's fascinating. I like that a lot, actually, because that's almost how I see things. I don't know. I think I am on the spectrum. I'm fucking autistic, dude. I can look at something that should shock me, and I can look at it like I'm a fucking, like somebody looking down, and I've always had that. And so people always ask me, like, how the fuck do you watch news and not get depressed? And I'm like, because it's not real to me. Like, it is. It's real to me, but, like, I don't absorb it. I'm watching it. I'm watching it from the outside. Right. So that's really fascinating. We're gonna have to have you back on, man, after I read the book, because me and Tony will read that shit. Yeah, because that'll be a fascinating conversation. We'll be able to probably communicate on a deeper level. Yeah.
Right.
I'm kind of curious, like, do you see any value in this effort of trying to push people more into the libertarian space? I feel like right now there's so many people who are going there without a story, and yes, you're creating more visible targets, but you're also creating more targets, which makes it easier for everyone to slip through.
I think that the general effect of it is that there's an opportunity cost. So for everybody who's getting involved in the LP, for every new person you pull into the LP, there's, in the vast majority of cases, I would say that person could be much more productive and effective doing something else. So the fact that they're leaving something else to get into the LP means that you're losing that difference in whether it's productivity or whatever. So I think that there can be a justification for certain people getting involved, kind of, because it's like, well, if you've already got everything, if you've got your life settled, if you're secure, like you can completely control the source of your income. You you own all of the land that you live on. You're completely financially secure. You've had kids. You've got your life completely sorted out, and you're just kind of like, all right, well, now what am I going to do? How am I going to change the world? And you're like, okay, well, I think that I see this area with the LP that I could get involved in to do that. Like, that's the type of person that I'd be like, okay, well, it seems like I would still tell that person, you'd be much better off putting this money and these resources and everything towards something that really moves the needle. Like you're taking like the most inefficient course. But someone like that, I'd be like, all right, well, go knock yourself out. But the thing with it is that when that type of person gets involved in it, by definition, that sort of person is going to drag a lot of other people who don't meet that qualification, because this is the way that human societies organize themselves. The small percent of people, this is what I was bringing up the book for, Pareto, Vilfredo Pareto has this thing called the Pareto distribution, which is that like all throughout human society, all throughout life, throughout reality, you see this distribution of the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 distribution. So 20% of the people will have 80% of the wealth. 80% of the people have the other 20%. And this goes all the way up like 99-1. So human societies are governed by the elites. Every single societal structure, it doesn't matter what your societal structure is, it will be governed by elites. And this was one of the observations that Pareto made, is that a revolution is not the people overthrowing the elites. It's one segment of the elites using the people as ammunition to unseat the other segment of the elites. This is how every single society works. And what we have today is a state that has formed itself into a what would you call it? Like an alchemical machine that takes opposition to itself and turns that into power. So when you oppose the regime, you give the regime a reason to exist, and not only to exist, but to expand its power. Because now, look at this. Look at all these radicals who are trying to destroy the state. We're the state who loves and protects you, and all these guys are coming to destroy it. So you actually are when you attack the state on its face, you are actually providing an opportunity for the state to level up.
So I find that fascinating, man. I don't think that something that their entire existence, it being opposition to something else, can exist for long. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
so like,
right, because it's bound to that thing.
Yes, exactly. Its existence is bound to the other thing. And so like a note that I just got from that is that we would be more effective by making ourselves elite. And I think that's where you got a bunch of shit.
Yes.
You're just like, stop being poor, bitch. You know, that's the meme that fucking went out. But like, I think you're right, because I'm looking at, dude, it hit with me, because I was just thinking about like the best thing we could do with the LP is to get our words out there and really make a big fucking stink. And we're going to look like terrorists. We're going to look like white nationalists, because 98% of them are fucking white men, because that's just the reality. I'm the brownest. Me and fucking Eric July are the brownest people in the libertarian movement. And, but that's not really going to do us. I mean, it's going to fucking help us grow our numbers, and we're going to fucking get bigger. But what are you going to do with it? We're still going to be the stinky asshole.
Is your goal to have more libertarians, or is your goal to have more liberty? Because those aren't that's not the same thing. Getting more libertarians doesn't automatically translate to more liberty. You've got to have something for those new libertarians to do. And whatever you would have those new libertarians do, that's the thing that you should be doing.
So we actually did a podcast breaking down yours and Pete's podcast, actually. We had a couple guests on. Okay. And I think what I got the most out of it was like, I came up with this fucking analogy that like, we're on the Titanic right now, and we're watching it fucking sink. And we're talking about like getting lifeboats, and like we're sitting on a lifeboat and we're watching it sink. Everybody else is fucking playing music and just they don't even know that the fucking boat's sinking, and they're just, and we're sitting there trying to convince them to come on a lifeboat with us. What we need to be doing is build another boat.
Exactly. That's exactly my position. And I've actually used a similar analogy that the Titanic is sinking, and there's not enough lifeboats for everybody. In fact, I would say right now, effectively, there are no lifeboats. Yeah. Like if the regime collapsed, if the regime collapses within 5 years, it's going to be absolute pandemonium. It's going to be a complete like global meltdown. It would be catastrophe on the level the likes of which the world has never seen. That's just because of it's a cancer that has just like I don't even know my medicine well enough, but it's like a cancer that has gotten to the point where it is like irreducibly complex with the rest of the world. And so if it goes down, the rest of the world goes with it. And I mean that's the nature of a parasite. Like it's gonna put itself in that position. So the question is whether it's going to kill the.
Oh, I was just going to say it gives you a whole other fucking thought about like Murray Rothbard's article. Would you press the button? Because I probably would, but it's going to be ugly if we just fucking all at once press that fucking button.
So what you got to realize then is that position is not concordant with the NAP. So that's where the libertarian position becomes self-defeating. Because by doing that, by pressing that button, you are going to destroy millions, probably billions of lives. People are going to literally die because you push that button. And and that's not to the general libertarian position, autistic position is basically, well, fuck them. They're wrong. Why should I have to change? And that's actually the response that I've gotten from a lot of people. They're like, I've said, if you want the world to change, it starts with you. You got to change yourself, and the rest. Like there's a time tested, always true way of changing the world, and it's called changing yourself. When you change yourself, you'll change the world. But the response I get from people is, well, they're the ones that are wrong. Why should I have to change? And I'm just like, because what else? Like, what else is there? Are you're going to sit around and wait for them to change? Because that's where when the libertarian idea of we just need to get more people to hear about libertarianism, the idea that this is a persuasion issue, and that if enough people heard the message of liberty, then everything would be all great. This fundamentally misapprehends the nature of human psychology, the structure of the state, the reality of the media complex, all these things. Like, the state doesn't exist because people sanction its existence.
Yeah.
The state exists and people sanction its existence. Its existence is independent of the will of the people.
Maybe at the beginning, but like you said, the cancer has evolved.
And even now, if you were to somehow turn the rest of the population against the state, and you just flip the chessboard over and you were able to completely destroy it, what history demonstrates is that you just created a vacuum for the exact, and it's going to be the exact same people too, because the people who will benefit the most from a sudden rush of chaos and strife are the wealthiest, most powerful people by definition, because they're the ones who have put themselves in the position to be able to survive that. So revolution is actually, once you start digging into this, you see revolution is actually a tool that is used by, I don't know how many words I want to say, but it's used by the cartels, the global cartels. They use revolution as a tool to expand their own power. And they've sucked people into opposing them, because you get this, I can't remember what the word is for it, but you get that dynamic you're describing where by being in opposition to one another, you actually sustain each other. You create a tension, and both of you can't exist without the other. So the ANCAPs can't exist without the state, and the state can't exist without the ANCAPs. They have to have each other.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of that. My issue with that would be that I don't know what else, what's the alternative? Because I feel like if I disagree with the idea that people don't want liberty, I'll take that position. I think that we've been trained so much through our education system, through our media, and that is entwined with us. We're not getting rid of that anytime soon, but just fundamentally, I think that that's something that's imposed upon us culturally. So I feel like to defend the LP for whatever they're worth, I feel like just giving people a counter message, a counter narrative to doing all of that. I think that, like, how else do you create people willing to build lifeboats? Because we need people to build lifeboats.
The way that you do that is you start building lifeboats and you get people to join you. The people will join you when they see you. As soon as they realize they need a lifeboat and they see that you're building it, that will actually give you the credibility to assume the position of an elite, to be able to dictate the structure of the future society. What you said there about how people actually want liberty, but it's the education, the media system, and everything that have brainwashed them against it. I think that's true, but it also means that in order to change their mind, you have to outcompete the most sophisticated mind control propaganda machine of all time. And the way that you have to do that, if you're using the LP route, is you have to go use their platforms, which lends legitimacy to the platform. So you're now trying to use their own tool against them, which would mean you would need a message that has to like light an absolute fire and get 75% of the population on board with you right away. But even then, even at that point, the state's not just going to just roll over and go away. Like, even then, you get all these people rallied together. Okay, well, now what? What are we gonna do with all these people who are all like ready for change? Because what history tells us is you get a whole bunch of people pissed off and riled up, and they start charging the gates, and they're either going to get completely mowed down, or they're actually going to succeed in overthrowing the regime. And when they do, they'll realize that they have been the tools of another segment of the elites who are ready to step in with the new regime that will be imposed upon them, whether they like it or not. This is just the nature of human societies. There will always be a regime. The regime will always exist. The question is, will the regime be a good regime or a bad regime? And that depends upon incentives.
So a couple of things that I find fascinating are, it feels like right now the government that we have currently is pushing us for a revolution. It feels like that they're doing absolutely everything they can to get every side to fight each other. They're getting them all fucking riled up, and they're like shaking up the fucking jar, and they're waiting for us to explode. What do you think they're, because they are fucking 10 steps ahead. What do you think their game plan is? What are they doing? You have any idea?
I've got a couple ideas.
I want to hear it.
one of them is they're waiting for a segment of the population to snap, because that will justify, I don't even want to say it. That will justify anything effectively. Yeah. That will justify them taking any steps necessary. So they're effectively, and as long as it's kind of cliche, but as long as you're all fighting each other, you're not fighting them. So there's an aspect of that there as well. But what I think the long game is if you listen to Klaus Schwab talk about stakeholder capitalism, he says that, so there's shareholder capitalism, which is where a company is ultimately responsible to its shareholders. Like, their job is to maximize the value of the company for their shareholders. Stakeholder capitalism says that a company is responsible to every single person who has a stake in that company. So that would be its customers, its shareholders, its employees, the people in the community around it, the people in the community of its customers and its employees and its shareholders. Really, what they do is they just list off every single person in existence. They're saying this organization is responsible to every human being on the planet. What they've done is they've said every company needs to function as a government. Every company needs to have the role of a government, of a democratic government that exists for the sake of providing care to its people. So what I see happening here is an evolution beyond Republican governance, little r Republican governance, into a new world of private statecraft. And they're effectively going to, like, right now you have the state, and then you have banks and corporations that drive the state. And what they're doing is they're getting the middleman out of the way. So you're going to see effectively, I think probably one of the narratives that you're going to see is, this is why I think that there's actually a very good chance that a Republican wins in 2024.
I think
because,
so. 100% actually.
Because I think that the narrative then is, we can't use the government anymore. The government has been taken over by white supremacist terrorists, and we can't use it anymore. So we need companies, we need Apple, we need Amazon, we need Google, we need Facebook, we need Sprint, we need, whatever company, we need them to begin stepping in and acting as governments themselves.
And doing what's best for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
and then they take so what I see is that, like, libertarians and conservatives are going to be like, yes, free market, private companies. Yeah, this is what we've dreamed of. But all it is the same people who have been weaponizing the state against you, now just weaponizing themselves against you directly.
Dude, those are the worst type of libertarians, and they're not even fucking worth discussing. They're
right. The state that we have exists as it does because of the market. Because there is market demand for a state like this. Have they used the education system and the media to generate that demand? Sure. But that doesn't change the fact that that demand exists. So when you appeal to the market, well, the market has given you this state. The market has provided you this state.
So I was always one of those people that saw Donald Trump, like, to me, I saw them allow him come in, and they allowed him. I mean, he was the guy that demonized capitalism. He was the one that demonized any thoughts of, like, republicanism, small government, any type of, and at the same time, he weakened all of the right wingers. Like, he got all the right wingers that were oath keepers saying, like, if somebody takes our guns, we're ready to fight. We're going to bleed and die. And then what does he do? He fucking takes their guns. He starts doing the fucking all that little bullshit. And so he stripped them of any principles that they did have. He effectively had them tie themselves to him. And then he was demonized and made this, like, giant hunk of shit, which he was. Like, to me, he was always a heel, man. He's an actor. He was the fucking guy on WWF. You know what I mean? Like, he played that character perfectly. And I think that he's destroyed any idea of, like, he was we will never be a socialist country. This kind of fucking bullshit while we're a socialist country, effectively.
Yeah,
while
we're what was it? Preserving the pre-existing conditions clause in the ACA.
Yep.
We'll never have socialized medicine. But also, every what do you call it? Insurance company has to pay to cover pre-existing conditions. Yeah, it was. I don't think that he was consciously playing that role. I think he was being played into that role. That's been my read of the situation. I think he was sincere. I think he struck me as being naive and sincere in the role that he was playing, and I think he's got this boomer. What do you call it? Like romanticism kind of about America and the good old days.
Make America great again.
Right. I think that he has
America
genuine.
great.
I think he has genuine. Like I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Like he has strong feelings for the myth of America. I think that he genuinely believes in that, and I think that he also, as a businessman, I think that he sees all of the waste and inefficiency in the government, and he's like, oh, this needs to be run as a government, but that waste there needs to be run as a business, but that waste and inefficiency is a feature of the system. That's the reason for the system to exist. So going after it was a direct threat to the regime.
Yeah, well, if he didn't do it purposely, holy shit, did he do the best job ever?
Right.
Because every single one of those things, maybe the things that actually made this country great, he fucking demonized. They're attached to him now. They're fucking tied to him. And so now, like, the rest of the country is, like, opposed in every single way, diametrically opposed to that.
And if the LP was to be successful with their goal, with the LPMC, with the take over the LP and do a big presidential campaign and get on all the top platforms and spit this hot liberty fire, if they were successful, like their absolute best case scenario would be being a shadow of that exact same phenomenon. That's if the Trump movement wound up that way, then you've just seen the model. Like that's exactly how you'll be treated as well.
Yeah.
What the regime did is Trump genuinely represented a threat to the regime. And the regime demonstrated the anti-fragility nature of itself by taking that threat and alchemically converting it into even more power and wealth for itself. And that's the exact process that I'm describing. When you attack the regime on its face, when you threaten key aspects of its foundation, when you present yourself as a legitimate threat to it, it will respond by making itself larger and more powerful because it controls the mind control mechanism.
Well, we can see right now that the Biden administration is looking for us to do that. He's fucking effectively calling everyone a fucking extremist. We're goddamn terrorists right now. You're a terrorist, Matt Erickson, because we're talking about liberty. We're talking about freedom. Yeah, you're a fucking terrorist. Like,
right.
Well, okay. So, like, I'll throw another, like, I want to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here again. If you looked at how many people trusted the news pre-Trump versus post-Trump, there's a huge drop-off in just trust in the system.
Huge.
So it's like, huge. I can see, like, some good from that. Like, I think it's good that people look at the news and go, oh, that's a corporate story.
I guess where I would push back on that is, though, that everyone is so separated right now. Like, everyone is in their fucking camps. And so, like, if it was a united opposition to the media and to, like, the cathedral, I would be fucking way more excited. But it's like, everybody's got guns and they're ready to stab each other, dude. It's an interesting thing. And they can use that energy.
Right, exactly. Because simply mistrusting the media isn't sufficient. You need to have that plus something different to inject your energy into. Just mistrusting the media just means that they don't need to use the media to brainwash you anymore. They can just crush you. You know, they don't. It's like, all right, well, this whole apparatus isn't useful anymore. We're just going to bypass it.
I mean, the media's done the fucking media. I mean, the Hollywood, like the fucking movie. None of those people fucking matter anymore. Like, name an influencer that matters right now. I can't name you one. Like, Cardi B is the most important person in politics. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So, with everybody so divided and with that destroyed, like, what you're saying is, like, the gloves are coming off. The state is starting to, like, take its mask off, and you're seeing it for the naked authoritarianism that it is.
Right. Which means that it's coming into the end of its life cycle. That's part of what you're seeing. So there is a white pill in this, which is that the regime will collapse. Every regime collapses eventually.
But
it will be replaced by something.
Yes, and that's what I'm afraid of, because, like, I'm watching them. Like, they know the dollar is done. They've already known the dollar is done. Like, because I would hear a libertarian, like, what's his name, Stossel, talk about, like, well, this is inflation and this, that, the other, and if we keep spending like this, and I'm like, and they're so stupid, and they're not fucking stupid. Like, Krugman knows what the fuck's going on. He's not fucking stupid. Like, they're doing this purposefully. They're ruining the fucking dollar on fucking purpose, so they have what they want to replace it. This is problem, reaction, solution. They are fucking getting ready for this crypto, digital, fucking US Digicoin, whatever the fuck it is, that can be tracked, traced, and turned off on the fucking, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. And they're maxing, they're squeezing out every last little bit of juice out of the dollar that they can, borrowing from the future of the dollar that it's never going to have.
Yeah.
So that
they're going hog wild right now. They know it's going to fucking crash. Like, you can actually watch, like, if you see the big musical artists and shit, like the old dead douchebags, like the Beatles or whoever, they're fucking selling all of their music. They're giving away all their fucking properties and shit. They're selling it for multi-fucking millions of dollars because they're milking it for all it's worth. They know this is all going to be worthless. This is all fucking worthless.
So the conclusion from that then is if you're going to enter the political system and you're going to try to use a political party to try to affect some sort of a solution, you are effectively, whether you intend to or not, you're effectively working to try to sustain the system that exists now when it's clear that it's going away.
So the way I see it is Dave Smith is, I love Dave Smith, actually. He brought me to libertarianism, actually.
Wow. Yeah.
But what I will say is that, like, to me, I see him as the guy yelling, "Hey, the boat's sinking, the boat's sinking," but he's still on the boat.
Right. Exactly.
And he's telling everybody, "Hey, look, everybody, the boat's going to sink, the boat's going to sink. We need to build another fucking boat." Yeah.
Exactly. He's calling people off the lifeboat to come back onto the boat and tell people, hey,
the boat's sinking. Yes.
Exactly.
I fucking agree with you.
Yes.
Fucking agree with you.
The question, so what, I don't know what the next thing is going to be. That's why people are like, well, what would you build instead? I don't know. That's the whole problem. We aren't even it's not like we have the new system partially built and we just need to get more minds on it to polish it off. So we can just I keep having this image of, from Pirates of the Caribbean, where they're where the boat's coming into the dock and it's like sinking as it comes down, and Jack Sparrow's standing at the top of it, and at the last minute, just before it drops underwater, he steps out onto the dock and walks away. I have that image in my head, and I'm like, what are we building that we can use that way? So it's like, if that thing was almost built and it was like, we just need to put like the finishing touches on it, then I could see you're going to do a political campaign just so you can say, look at this shit we've got. Come over and join us. Even then, that may not be the best route to go, because you may not want to just like broadcast that to the world. You're not going to save everybody. You're going to save the people who have put themselves in a position to hear your message. So to me, when I'm having this conversation with people, I'm not trying, because I've had people like, they try to turn it back around to me and say, well, you're just doing the same thing that he's doing. You're giving a message to lots of people that they're not going to listen to or accept. And my message isn't for everybody. My message is explicitly targeted at the people who are already thinking the sort of thing that I am. I want to get their attention because I know most of them are smarter than I am. And I want to get those people and have them focused on this problem. This engineer, like, the problem of liberty is not a moral or ethical problem. It's an engineering problem. We need to engineer a system with an incentive structure that encourages the elites, who will inevitably be at the top of the system, to act in a way that benefits the rest of us. So our interests align, so that when I participate in the system, I make it better for everyone else. And when they participate in the system, they make it better for me. And they have an incentive to participate in this system so that it will make their lives better. And when they do, it makes my life better. You're dealing with an engineering problem. You're trying to engineer a solution. You don't need the whole population to be on board with you for that. You just need to create it, and they'll come.
What are you saying, Tony?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like so many people, even like on the left, like socialists, are trying to engineer society the way that they seem fit. So they're looking at this and they're trying to put the nuts and bolts together in a structural way and in a very detached way at some level. I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think about like social credit, like as a system? 'Cause I feel like it's terrifying if used the way it's probably going to be. But I do feel like that kind of lends to some ability to like trade fluidly within people, have some kind of like. Do you think that that's a system like worth building up?
I think it's inevitable. I think it's going to be built, and so then the question is, will it be built? See, this is when you start thinking like a Machiavellian, where you recognize, okay, this is inevitable. It's going to happen. So any effort put toward trying to stop it from happening is wasted. And then potentially, if you're relating to a system that takes energy injected against it and converts it into its own power, then you're losing doubly, because not only are you wasting time, but you're actually accelerating the timeline for the thing you're fighting against. So when you recognize that it's inevitable, like I've told people for probably like 2 years now, I've said, get used to not having privacy. Live your life such that if you found out you have no privacy, it wouldn't make a difference to you, because privacy is going away. There will be no privacy. absent a geomagnetic event that knocks down the electrical grid and launches us back into the Stone Age. Like that's the only way that there will be a future where people have privacy.
Then we get to
Privacy
live
is
like
becoming
Uncle
a weapon.
Teddy. We get to live out Uncle Teddy. Yeah.
Right. Privacy is becoming a weapon. Those who have it can use it against everyone else. The reason that state agents are able to do what they're able to do is because it's private. They're acting in the dark. They have plausible deniability. There's no actual proof of the stuff that they've done, so it turns into an influence game, and our word against yours. What we're moving toward is global transparency, like absence of privacy. That's an inevitability. It's going to happen. So then the question is, how can you position yourself to benefit more than everyone else around you from that sort of situation, from that kind of scenario? So if a social credit system is inevitable, then rather than trying to stop it, and I would even say rather than trying to make yourself take yourself off the grid argument, where you're like, oh, I'm not going to be subject to it. All you're doing is you're creating an attack surface for people to come after you, because now you're identifying yourself and isolating yourself as, hey, I'm your enemy. I'm the person who's against you. I'm the person who will fight you. I'm the most radical opponent of yours. So you're enticing them to come after you.
I want that though so bad, because how I see it is like we actually have a pretty interesting community here. We live in the Portland area, and there's a lot of free-thinking folks like us. And what we're trying to do with a lot of us is we're trying to make little communities, right? We're trying to we don't obviously live together, but like we know a lot of each other, and like I'm fucking prepping, man. I've got food. Maybe I shouldn't put this online. I'm ready, man. And like in 2 weeks, we have a house that's closing, and I got a fucking big yard. That garden's gonna be sick. It's gonna be off the hook. Like I see that maybe is the only small scale answer. Is just people just building for themselves and becoming self reliant in that way, and then sharing with people.
Yes.
Like sharing amongst ourselves in small, tight-knit communities.
There's two ways that you can build wealth, two broad categories for building wealth. One is increasing your own, this is going to sound super hokey, I just realized the way it's going to be phrased. One is increasing your own net worth, and the other one is increasing your own network. So you could build wealth vertically, or you could do it horizontally. And ideally, you do both. Yeah. So with Jason Stapleton and our Wealth, Power, and Influence program, our core message is that you don't ask for liberty. You don't beg someone to give it to you. You create it for yourself. And you create it by controlling the source of your income, making that income mobile, where you can take it anywhere in the world, and then constantly improving your own human value by increasing your own human capital and making yourself invaluable to your community, to people around you. And then what we're actually beginning to add to that now, and what is one of the main messages of the King Pilled show, is that that community is security. You need to have a community of people who are like-minded, who are connected. Ideally in meat space, like ideally in person, but at the very least digitally, because the time is going to come where the open, carefree days of the last several decades are going away, and the cities in particular are going to be a shit show.
Yeah,
they're going to be an absolute clusterfuck, and anybody who's within it, if you're in the city, you sure as hell better be able to take care of yourself and be able to buy off anyone, essentially.
Tony, you better get out of Portland, buddy.
I am. I'm making plans,
good.
so.
We're moving about a half hour outside and kind of a more rural.
Yeah. And that's that's my vision kind of over the next couple of years is finding like-minded people. This is why I started doing the show. I want to find people who see what I see and think the way that I do, And I want to encourage people to start relocating themselves to the same areas. As people are leaving the urban, number one, you got to get out of the cities. You got to get out of the urban areas.
Dude, I keep looking at Idaho like a motherfucker.
That's what we're looking at as well.
Yeah.
Idaho or Texas
Right.
is the two places that are on our minds right now.
Yeah.
Texas, because that's where a lot of people are. That's where a lot of like-minded people are. So there's a better network there. But then Idaho, because it's out in BFE. And there's like the Twin Falls area is just, we drove through there a couple months ago and it's just absolutely stunning. It's one of the key agricultural hubs in the US.
Yeah.
And
it's fucking beautiful.
And it's gorgeous. Yeah.
It's everything that I like about, because I grew up on the coast. I grew up in Pacific Northwest, and it's everything that I like about, I grew up in Eureka in Humboldt County.
Okay. I grew up in Bremerton, Washington.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, you guys don't consider us Pacific Northwest, I guess, but we consider ourselves.
Yeah, you're close enough.
But dude, it's everything that, like, Western and Northern Idaho is some of the most beautiful fucking places I've ever seen, man.
Glacier National Park in Montana is absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, I think that's that sort of area is going to wind up becoming kind of a stronghold. And I think what's going to happen too is that the regime isn't going to have, it doesn't have infinite assets. Like, it's not going to be able to keep a full court press everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
Eventually, the internet is where a lot of people are basically just going to kind of have to check out of the internet and not really use the internet, at least in the way that we do today. They're going to have to create some kind of a parallel system effectively that most people connect with. But
could we build an intranet? Could we build like a smaller, something that we can communicate with?
All that shit's over my head.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm taking Vin Armani's Bitcoin Mystery School here in a few weeks, just so I can understand. Like, I'm like, all right, shit, I need to be able to understand how this crypto stuff works, because like I think I'm going to need to be able to, like, I don't know what the fuck you boot up a node or whatever, and like all. I'm gonna have to know how to do that shit. So I'm gonna go try to learn that. But that's the path forward. The path forward is finding like-minded people and creating intentional communities with resource sharing and like looking out for each other in rural or remote areas in the country, if you're even going to remain within the US.
Well, see, me and Tony had a fucking idea too. I was like, look, we're playing a game of Monopoly, and we're just some assholes playing, and they've been running the bank this whole time. They have the fucking instruction manual, and they're using these rules against us. And this is one of the first times I was like, man, we got to start playing by the fucking, we need to start looking at the rule books. And like, if we got to cheat, we got to cheat. If we got to fucking, we just got to fucking play the game. And I was like, man, what if we started our own fucking church, a church of Libertas, got a fucking 501c3 going. We got a tax exempt little thing, and we just like had a little fucking, a little piece of land in Idaho, or fucking somewhere in the middle of Oregon or Washington or up there, and just like, I don't know, man. So just started. Dude, I was looking in Washington. Dude, I found like it was 200 fucking acres for $200,000.
Jeez, in Eastern Washington.
It was Northern Washington, so I mean it's probably cold as shit. But I was like, dude, like buffaloes and shit do fine there. We can fucking have a buffalo ranch. You know what I mean? Grow potatoes and just fucking sell shit. And just like that's enough land where. What are we saying, Tony? Sorry.
I also think that if you're going to do something like that, you ought to get ahead of the PI battle, just because you don't want to be crushed. Like, you want to have everyone going like, yeah, we like those guys. They're pretty cool. Like, I feel like a lot of people are going to do that.
Let's talk a bunch of social justice nonsense. Get everyone on board with us.
The way that you do that, the way that you get everybody, the way that you win the PR battle. I mean, honestly, the way that you win the PR battle is never getting involved with it and doing whatever you need to not have to go that route. But ultimately, if you do, you want to ensure that your people are seen as valuable people. Not that you've got the best message, or not that you have the most factual worldview, or not that not that you have all the best ideas. You need to be seen as people who generate significant value to the world, who are solving people's problems, who are making people's lives better actively. And you do that you don't do that through the political realm. You do that through business, through education, through entertainment. Those are the arenas where you begin to position yourself to compete in that PR battle. This, as I said for a while now, that the future of the liberty movement is in business, education, and entertainment. And the latter two are subsets of the first one. Education and entertainment are just forms of business. Liberty is not something that you ask for. It's something that you create. You have to create it, and you create it through generating value and through amassing a community of people who will all look out for each other. And you just have to treat the state as, in whatever form that it has, you have to treat it as a constant. Now, the time may come where you and your network, or even you individually, have accumulated the resources necessary that you're like, we want to strike out on a major endeavor. So we talked about this idea of like private statecraft becoming a thing, these major corporations basically just bypassing the government and beginning to govern directly. What I would love to see is people who think like us beginning to innovate in providing statecraft services themselves in a given region. And, I don't know, pooling resources and buying an island somewhere. And then using that island as a place to workshop a new social system, a new legal system of some type. Mencius Moldbug has his patchwork idea, where he's described the way that you could run a state as a joint stock corporation. So it's effectively like a royal monarchy that's run as a joint stock corporation. Because monarchy is basically every single institution that we encounter in our daily life is a monarchy. It's run as a monarchy with a CEO at the top. It has a board of directors, but every CEO has his court of, or every king has his court of nobles. The monarchy is something that's baked into our consciousness. And I mean, from a Christian perspective, we are all children of the king. So that it's even there in a spiritual sense. The only area where we don't apply this monarchical principle is in our politics. But even that has moved in that direction to where now we effectively have an elected king. So monarchy is something that's just innate in the human psychology. And what I would love to see is a group of people who think like we do, who've done the work to secure their own, to control the source of their income, to secure their own wealth, and provide for their families, and network with other people who have wealth, power, and influence themselves, to get an organization of people like that and say, we're going to buy some, like there's a private city that's being created off the coast of Honduras, I think, right now. And Peter Thiel is associated with it because of course he is. And what they're doing is they have purchased this island, and they've built a company that is going to run that island. And they're it's not very innovative, because they're it's kind of just, it's basically continuing within the Western tradition of liberal government.
Keep it a corporation, and they're explicitly a corporation. They might not get fucked over. Like, you remember all those people that were seasteading? Remember, and they were trying to build their own little islands, and then Thailand was like, "Fuck you, this is ours again." You know what I mean? Like, they don't play with that shit. They're like,
right.
So maybe if they explicitly they're secret about, like, hey, we're trying to influence the world. We're actually just a corporation, and we're doing this, and we're selling a product, and under the fucking rug, we're influencing the fucking world, because that's what they're doing. Like, Google is a corporation. But what the fuck are you doing? You're social influencing the world. Yeah, you're fucking with me.
Right.
So
that's where, in all those cases. So when I bring these, when I kind of suggest this to people, there's when I can suggest it to myself, there's all kinds of objections. And it's like, well, maybe this will happen, maybe that'll happen. Right. This is why I want people focused on this and trying to engineer these kinds of solutions, precisely because there are so many different ways that it can be fucked with. And ultimately, you're having to go toe-to-toe with the largest organizations in the history of mankind, which is what the modern corporate states are. So ultimately, like, I think the way to approach it is just treat them as a constant and pay them whatever you need to pay them to live the way that you want to live. And and approach them from that perspective that, like, look, we don't want to, like, we're not trying to grow a sovereign nation that's going to compete and take you over. We're just trying to look out for our people on our island, and we're going to do business with you. We're going to trade with you. We'll provide you, we're going to be growing little engineers here, and we'll do the engineering for your business, whatever. Approach them from a perspective of peace, and being willing to cooperate with them in whatever way necessary. If they're like, maybe the land, you like look at the land and it's the island and it's valued at $50 million, whatever. I'm just pulling a number out of my ass. And you're like, all right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to pool our money and we're going to purchase this island from the sovereign nation that currently possesses it. And that sovereign nation comes to you and says, all right, it'll be $5 billion. Then, okay, I guess we have to come up with $5 billion to get it. Just roll with the punches. Just take every single situation as it comes and do whatever is necessary to create your own liberty.
I fucking love it, man. It's brilliant. And I think that that's a lot less threatening than starting our own religion, because religions are looked at fucking.
And well, see, I would go that route as well. I just wouldn't be obvious about it.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. You ever get into any Bucky Fuller?
Never heard of him.
He's just like some '60s designer, but one of the things he said was that if you want to, like, instead of fighting against what you don't like, find out what it does and do it better. And it's kind of like getting that vibe off of that.
I really like that.
Kind of like, okay, like, this is a constant, and just figure out, like, okay, so we can't escape this, so let's try to design it better.
Right. You're basically innovating in statecraft and attempting to out innovate because the reality is, if something works, it will continue to work. Like, selective pressure over time will make it so that the thing that works continues to work, because the thing that works is true. That's the definition of truth, is the thing that works. And if your ideas are so good, then you should be able to innovate with them in a way that you don't have to persuade the rest of the world to just come follow you. They will want to do it. They'll be lining up to do it. They should be coming to you, money in hand, saying, how can I be a part of what you're doing? You shouldn't be having to go out and flog them and like just beg and plead and wheedle and like try to get them to come on board with you. If your ideas are so good and so effective, apply them, put them into practice, and let your work speak for themselves. And the people will come. The people will come to you, assuming that your ideas are actually that great. Now, if your ideas sound really great in theory, but then fall apart once they're put into practice, or immediately devolve into something else, that's a you problem. Like, your product sucks. You have to innovate a better product. If people aren't buying what you're trying to sell them, that's not their problem. They aren't the ones who are wrong. You are. You're the one who's trying to sell it to them. This is like a basic business principle. If you've created a product and you go out and you're trying to sell it to people and nobody wants it, then you don't say, "Oh, well, they're the ones that are wrong. They should love this. Look at how amazing this product is." I mean, you can do that, but you're just wasting your breath.
Yeah.
What you do is you go back to the drawing board and you rebuild the product. You make it better. You improve it in some sense, or you drop the price, or you make a better sales pitch, or you do something like that. You have to change what you're doing.
I love it, man. This is fucking fascinating. I know we're getting close to your time here. I want to have you back on after I read the Machiavellians. I love talking about solutions too, because like everything we talk about is really blackpilling, because it is. When you look into the fucking eye of Sauron, dude, there's a lot of black pill.
Yes.
Right. And so we got to find the little glimpses of white pill in there. Dude, I think having you on.
When you read the book, I think that it will ultimately be it'll be black pilling to you at first, but then ultimately it will be white pilling, because you'll realize that people are really fucking stupid. People are very, very
Done.
easy to lead around, to manipulate. That people are lemmings that are they're just following their programming. Once you realize that, then it's like, okay, this is a system that I can hack. This isn't something that's just some incomprehensible thing that's out of my control. This is a system that I can hack, and I put myself into the system, and I realize that if I like tug on this little cord here, then that little thing will ding and it'll go over. It's this big Rube Goldberg machine, but you can reverse engineer it and you can figure out how it works and you can figure out your place within it. And that, to me, that creates a lot of clarity for how to move forward. And it rather than, to me, nothing is more blackpilling than the idea that we have to try to get the world on board with libertarian theory. That's the most blackpilling shit I've ever heard, because nobody gives a shit about libertarian theory. The only people who care about libertarian theory are libertarians. And the reason that libertarianism isn't more popular isn't because people haven't heard of libertarians. It's because they have heard of libertarians and they don't want shit to do with them. So that to me is the black pilling path forward. The white pill path forward is, this is a system that we can hack and we can engineer our way out of it. We just have to be honest about what the system is and what we're working with. And once we begin that process, I think that we're on the cusp of creating a network of people like us who get this, who see who begin to see a path forward. And it's like, all right, we don't need to go fuss around with this politics media charade. We can actually get into the guts of the machine and we can begin working on it ourselves.
Yeah. Well said, man. And I'm glad that I finally got to talk to you. And
yeah, me too, man.
Let's continue to build this fucking community of like-minded folks, man. You're in the
Absolutely.
Pacific Northwest too, aren't you?
I'm in LA now. I'm not in LA. I'm out east of LA.
That's cool.
And we'll be here for another 2 years or so. We signed a lease, and little man was just born, 10 months old, and so we got to prioritize him for right now. And then
awesome,
we'll be relocating somewhere.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's good talking to you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've got a little one that's about to be born in October. So,
what's the due date?
October 6th.
Oh, he was born October 2nd.
Yeah,
that's crazy. All right, man. I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, man.
Okay.